Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Hello, good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal has adjourned Peter Obi's pre-hearing to May 19th. Outside Nigeria, Imran Khan accused of hiding supporters wanted for attacks on army. Turkey's president promises supporters bigger victory ahead of runoff vote. My name is Femi Olanipekun. Now the news in detail. The Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal sitting in Abuja today adjourned to Friday for continuation of pre-hearing at a petition by presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, against the President-elect Bola Tinubu. Labour Party National Chairman Julius Abure was also in court today, while the party's factional chairman Lamidi Apapa was also present. The tribunal had last week adjourned the pre-hearing session on Obi and the Labour Party's petition till May 17th at the instance of the petitioners. Apapa had attempted to occupy the seat reserved for Abure but was resisted. At the resumed hearing today, Counsel for Labour Party Livy Zoko informed the court that the scheduled meeting to agree on documents to be tendered for hearing has not yielded much results, as the Independent National Electoral Commission has only made available 30% of the documents required from them. Further added that the party is yet to get documents with respect to Rivers State, where he said a resident electoral commissioner said there were no forms ECHA available to be given, but is yet to put that in writing, despite request to do so. The federal government has condemned the attack on the convoy of United States consulate workers in Ogbaru local government area of Anambra State by yet-to-be-identified gunmen yesterday. This was made known today in a statement signed by the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Francesca Omayile. The convoy of embassy officials who were on a humanitarian mission in the state came under fire while they were passing through the area. The hoodlums who abducted two police operatives murdered two of the PMF operatives, two staff of the consulate, and set their bodies and vehicles ablaze. However, the federal government says an investigation was ongoing to fish out the culprits and bring them to book. And outside Nigeria, a Pakistani official has accused former Prime Minister Imran Khan of sheltering aides and supporters wanted over attacks on the army following his arrest last week, and warned he had 24 hours to hand them over. Punjab Province Information Minister Mir told reporters today that some 30 to 40 terrorists who were involved in attacking the army's buildings and installations are hiding at Zaman Park, referring to the upmarket Lahore neighborhood where Khan lives. Mr. Khan said Mir said Khan had 24 hours to surrender the suspect and that a police operation would be launched if he did not comply. In response, a politician belonging to Khan's Pakistan Tehreek in South Party, Taimur Khan, told journalists that the allegation that Khan is hiding riot suspect is only going to increase the political temperature, adding that it is very dangerous. In Europe, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has lost his appeal against the 2021 corruption and influence peddling conviction. Today, the Paris Court of Appeals upheld a 3-year prison sentence against Sarkozy, but it ruled that 2 years would be suspended and Sarkozy would wear an electronic bracelet instead of going to jail for the remaining year. The court also said the conservative politician remains banned from public office for 3 years. However, his lawyers said they would appeal the decision before France's highest appeals court, the Court of Cassation. In March 2021, Sarkozy became France's first post-war president to be sentenced to prison when a court found he and his former lawyer, Thierry Herzog, had formed a corruption pact with George Gilbert Azibert to obtain and share information about an investigation. In the meantime, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has promised his supporters a bigger victory when they return to the polls in 12 days' time in a runoff vote for the country's presidential election. Erdogan, who is seeking a third term as president and a 5-year extension of his 20-year rule, has appeared in a buoyant mood since Sunday's parliamentary and presidential elections. The Turkish president must face a second round against opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu on May 28th, as no candidate received more than 50% of the vote. Although he received 49.5% of the votes in the presidential race to Kılıçdaroğlu's 44.9%, his party dropped votes from the 2018 elections. Elsewhere, Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso dissolved the opposition-controlled National Assembly in a decree today, bringing forward legislative and presidential elections a day after he presented his defense in an impeachment process against him. Lasso denies accusations it turned a blind eye to alleged embezzlement related to a contract at state-owned oil transportation company, Flopec. The right-wing president can govern for up to 6 months by decree under the South American country's constitution. The National Electoral Council now has 7 days to call presidential and legislative elections, which must be held within 90 days. Those elected will finish the terms of Lasso and the lawmakers removed, which had been set to end in May 2025. In the United Kingdom, Prince Harry, Meghan, and her mother were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase involving paparazzi. According to a spokesperson for the prince, the incident happened after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex attended an awards ceremony in New York yesterday. In a statement, the prince's spokesperson said the relentless pursuit lasted for over 2 hours. They added that it resulted in near collisions with other drivers on the road, pedestrians, and police officers. The incident is said to have happened after the couple's first public appearance together since the king's coronation earlier this month. And here in Africa, authorities in Lesotho have declared an indefinite curfew in the hope that curtailing the movement of people at night will help curb gun violence in a small southern African kingdom. The curfew, which came into force yesterday, comes just days after a prominent radio journalist was shot dead. According to the document signed by police commissioner, residents are banned from being outside between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and 4 a.m. and the curfew will remain in place until further notice. Police Minister Libona Lefima said the move aimed to tackle gun violence across the country. Kenyan officials have discovered 22 more bodies buried in the East African country's Chakahola forest, raising the death toll of a starvation cult to 201. On Friday, officials exhumed 29 bodies, including the remains of 12 children buried in one grave. While briefing reporters, Regional Commissioner Rhoda Onyancha said one more suspect was arrested, bringing the total to 26 people detained in connection with the Good News International Church.
10 more bodies have been recovered in the Kenya's coastal forest, where people are reported to have been made to starve to death after joining a doomsday cult. This brings the number of bodies recovered as the police continue investigating the deaths to 211. After a 2-day break, the exhumation process in the vast Chakahola forest continued on Tuesday. Of the new bodies found by the government's forensic team, 2 were children. 3 members of the religious cult were rescued in a critical condition after starving in the forest and were taken to hospital for stabilization. Those reported missing at the tracing centers remain at 610. Paul Mackenzie, leader of the Good News International Church, was accused of ordering his followers to starve their children and themselves to death so they could go to heaven before the end of the world, which he predicted to be on April 15. The taxi driver turned preacher had earlier been denied bail by a Kenyan court, while the Kenyan president, William William Ruto appointed a commission of inquiry into the deaths of people believed to have starved themselves to death, while a court ordered that the court's leader remain in prison. The commission of inquiry will examine whether administrative or intelligence lapses contributed to the deaths. Mackenzie has not commented publicly on the accusations against him, nor has he been required to enter a plea to any criminal charge. Mackenzie appeared in court in the port city of Mombasa last week, where prosecutors asked the judge to hold him for an additional 90 days as their investigation continued. Mackenzie was arrested on March 14 after police raided his church. Investigators are charging the pastor with radicalization and terrorism. The judge said he will deliver a ruling this Wednesday on the prosecution's request. Kenyan President William Ruto has said his government takes responsibility for the deaths of more than 200 members of the Christian court who starved themselves, admitting that state officers in Kilifi County failed to protect the followers of Good News International Church from starving to death. Postmortem examinations showed that some of the victims died of hunger, while others were killed by strangulation or suffocation, and some had injuries to the head. Temitokbe Ajijolaoluola, Western Spring Television News.
You're watching Spring Global and Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Dramatist, playwright, and icon of Yoruba thematic arts, Duro Ladipo was born December 18, 1931 in Osogbo, southwest Nigeria. His clergyman father christened him Timothy. His other names, Duro Dola, Duro Shomo, Duro Rike, reflected his persona and the circumstances that surrounded his birth. The legendary stage actor had in several public fora identified himself as one of the greatest abikus born to die in this world. Family records reveal how he was born and died 13 times. The intertwining names he bore thus lent credence to his spiritism. Duro Ladipo was one of the best known and world-acclaimed Yoruba dramatists to emerge from post-colonial Africa. His notable works, Obakoso, Obawaja, and Moremi, took him beyond Africa to several parts of the world. By the time Duro Ladipo died on 11 March 1978, Nigeria's first cultural ambassador had acquired a towering image as an artist whose works adorned the frontage of Trenchard Hall, University of Ibadan. Western Spring Television identifies Duro Ladipo as a major character in history. Fumilayo Ransom Kuti was an educationist and advocate of women's rights. She was recognized for her vitriolic comments against colonial policy of taxation as it affected the Nigerian women. Bere, as fondly addressed by her women followers, Fumilayo championed the initiation of universal adult suffrage, which gave an unprecedented leeway for women to contest elective offices and power to exercise voting rights. Married to a foremost educationist and teacher, Israel Oladotun Ransom Kuti, the first president of Nigeria Union of Teachers, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti was the mother of children who inherited her spirit of activism. Olufela and Be Ololari, the former, a renowned musical legend. She was the first female student of Abeokuta Grammar School and the first female to own and drive a car in Nigeria. The award recipient of Member of Order of Nigeria MON and Lenin Peace Prize, was born on 25th October 1900 and was killed on 13th April 1978 by rampaging road soldiers in Lagos. Western Spring Television identifies Fumilayo Ransom Kuti as a watershed character in history.
other news, at least 8 people have died and thousands have been evacuated as heavy rains battered northern Italy's Emilia-Romagna region, triggering widespread floods. Today's flooding caused the cancellation of the Formula One Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, which had been due to take place on Sunday in Imola. Civil Protection Minister Nello Musumeci said some areas had received half their average annual rainfall in 36 hours, causing rivers to burst their banks, sending water flowing through towns and submerging thousands of hectares of farmlands. Musumeci said about 50,000 people are without electricity. The Vice President of Emilia-Romagna, Irene Priolo, told reporters that 8 bodies have been retrieved around the flood zone, adding that the rains were easing, but river levels were still rising. Singapore has hanged a man for trafficking cannabis in its second execution in 3 weeks. The 37-year-old ethnic Malay Singaporean was executed at Changi Prison on the island's east coast at dawn today, after his last-minute attempt to reopen his case was rejected by the appeal court without a hearing. Kokila Anamalai of the Transformative Justice Collective, which campaigns for the abolition of death penalty in Singapore, said the man, who was not named because his family asked for privacy, was convicted in 2019 of trafficking about 1.5 kilograms of cannabis. His bid to reopen the case was based on DNA evidence and fingerprints that tied him to a much smaller amount, which he admitted to possessing, but the court rejected it. On April 26, Singapore hanged a 46-year-old man for trafficking more than 1 kilogram of cannabis, despite last-minute appeals for clemency from his family, an activist that had attracted international attention. In Asia, a Chinese comedy troupe has been charged with a $2.1 million penalty over a joke about the military that invoked a slogan from President Xi Jinping. The joke, which likened the behavior of a comedian's dogs to military conduct, provoked authorities. The Shanghai Xiaohu Culture Media Co. and comic Li Haoshi had humiliated the People's Army. The company accepted the penalty and terminated Mr. Li's contract. The remark was made during a stand-up performance in Beijing on Saturday, when Mr. Li alluded to 2 canines he had adopted, which were chasing a squirrel. New Zealand police have launched a homicide inquiry into a fire at an emergency housing hostel in Wellington, where at least 6 people were killed. Officials said up to 20 people were still missing, and they were treating the blaze as an act of arson. The fire had broken out at a 4-story low-first lot hostel early Tuesday, forcing residents to the rooftop and some to jump from windows. Due to the damage, police have not yet been able to confirm the death toll. However, they warned that number could rise today, as a team of investigators was sent to the building after an assessment of the building's integrity. The 92-room hostel was known to house residents from vulnerable and marginalized communities, including those on welfare and disability pensions, as well as workers from the city's main hospital.
We are treating it as an arson. I'm not prepared to say why or the reasons for us treating it as an arson, other than to say that we are. I can say, having seen some early photographs, that the damage is extensive. That in some of the floors, and on the 3rd floor in particular, the roof has collapsed, and that in places on the floor, a pile of debris and burnt debris is stacked as high as 1 metre.
A court has ruled that Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes must report to prison as she appeals against her fraud conviction. 39-year-old Holmes had asked the judge to remain free while she fought against her jail sentence for a blood testing hoax. She was sentenced to over 11 years in prison after a jury last year found her guilty of defrauding investors. In a separate ruling, U.S. District Judge Edward Davila also ordered Holmes to pay $452 million to victims. She will split the multi-million-dollar payment with her former romantic and business partner, ex-Theranos boss Ramesh Balwani, who was sentenced to 13 years in prison after being convicted on 12 counts of fraud and conspiracy last year. Now to some business stories. The chief executive of ChatGPT's OpenAI, Sam Altman, has told legislators in the United States that government regulation of artificial intelligence is critical because of the potential risk it poses to humanity. Altman used his appearance in front of a U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee to urge Congress to impose new rules on big tech, despite deep political divisions that for years have blocked legislation aimed at regulating the internet. He also proposed the formation of a U.S. or global agency that would license the most powerful AI systems and have the authority to take that license away and ensure compliance with safety standards. Altman's San Francisco-based startup gained public attention after it released ChatGPT, a free chatbox tool that answers questions with convincingly human-like responses late last year. But initial worries about how students might be able to use ChatGPT to cheat on assignments have expanded to broader concerns about the ability of the latest crop of generative AI tools to mislead people, spread falsehoods, violate copyright protections, and disrupt some jobs.
Look, we have tried to be very clear about the magnitude of the risks here. I think jobs and employment and what we're all going to do with our time really matters. I agree that when we get to very powerful systems, the landscape will change. I think I'm just more optimistic that we are incredibly creative and we find new things to do with better tools, and that will keep happening. My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world. I think that could happen in a lot of different ways. It's why we started the company. It's a big part of why I'm here today and why we've been here in the past and we've been able to spend some time with you. I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong, and we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government to prevent that from happening, but we try to be very clear-eyed about what the downside case is and the work that we have to do to mitigate that.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, says the depreciation of sub-Saharan African currencies against the US dollar pushes up public debt stock. IMF said weaker currencies make the fight to curb inflation harder, given sub-Saharan Africa's dependence on imports. The Bretton Woods institution said countries and region have recorded an average of 8% depreciation of their currencies since January 2022. IMF, however, said the extent varies by country, adding that Ghana's cedi and Sierra Leone's loan depreciated by more than 45%. President Joe Biden and Republican leaders have expressed cautious optimism that a deal to raise the U.S. debt ceiling to within reach following emergency talks at the White House. But House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy told reporters that the two sides are still far apart. Without a deal, the U.S. could enter a calamitous default on its $1.4 trillion debt as soon as the 1st of June. A failure by the U.S. government to meet its debt obligations could trigger global financial chaos. The Democratic president said yesterday's hour-long Oval Office meeting was productive. Mr. McCarthy said afterwards that he believed the deal was possible by the end of this week.
Biden had a very big election where the Democrats won and took over their Supreme Court. They had work requirements on the ballot, 82%. And what work requirements actually do, help people get a job. Every data point shows that, and it helps people move forward. So the public wants it. Both parties want it. The idea that they want to put us into a default because they will not work with on that is ludicrous to me. Look, we're talking about all the programs because it helps people get into a job. And what does it mean when somebody gets in a job? They get better pay, they're able to buy their houses, but it also helps our supply chain going forward. So this is something that President Biden as senator voted for. This is something that President Bill Clinton signed. Are the Democrats become so progressive, so far to the left, they're changing their policies now, and they want to put the country in default? Look, the Republicans are the only ones who have raised the debt limit. And we did it with an idea of limit, save, and grow. Grow our economy, make it stronger, make us less dependent on China, and curb inflation. And that's exactly what it is.
And out of sports, Chelsea striker Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is to return to the Gabon side a year after announcing his international retirement. The 33-year-old retired as his country's record goal scorer with 28 goals in 68 appearances in May 2022. The forward said the return was prompted by a meeting with African country's President Ali Bongo Ondimba. Gabon, led by former La Rochelle defender Patrice Neveu, currently top their 2023 Africa Cup of Nations qualification group. They can seal their place at the tournament in Ivory Coast next January with a game to spare when they host the Democratic Republic of Congo in June. Italy and Juventus captain Leonardo Bonucci says he will retire from football at the end of next season. The 36-year-old has won 8 Serie A titles over 2 spells at the Italian club and made his 500th appearance against Sevilla last week. He also has 120 international caps and was part of the Italy side that beat England to win the Euro 2020 in July 2021. Bonucci, whose contract expires next season, began his career at Inter Milan in 2005, where he won his first Serie A title in 2005-2006. And before we end the Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. The Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, sitting in Abuja today, adjourned to Friday for continuation of pre-hearing in the petition by presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, against the president-elect, Bola Tinubu. And outside Nigeria, Pakistan official has accused former Prime Minister Imran Khan of sheltering aides and supporters wanted over army attacks in the army following his arrest last week, and warned they had 24 hours to hand them over. Turkey's President Recep Erdogan has promised his supporters a bigger victory when they return to the polls in 12 days' time in a runoff vote for the country's presidential election. You can follow us on all of our social media handles on the YouTube channel, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanipekin. Good evening.